Hi guys, thanks for being here today. Just to give you just a 1 minute about the team so far. It's very, very evident, that the guys, worked hard this summer. They've come to camp in shape. We've practiced real well. We've got, a lot of veteran leadership on the defensive side, so I'm very fortunate, and we're very fortunate in that respect. And those guys have done a great job through the first 7 or 8 days here, setting the pace, setting the standard, the championship standard the coach talks about. Looking forward to tonight. We've got a scrimmage tonight. 3 weeks from today, obviously, we open up against Stephen F. Austin. So tonight, when the coaches aren't out there barking at them and you were off to the side and they've got to communicate with one another and do their thing, we'll learn a little bit more about our unit and our team tonight. So with that, any questions?
Please raise your hand, we'll get a mic.
Coach Steve Robertson from Gene's Page. Secondary-wise, how do you feel right now about the personnel and about the development this far?
Yeah, we've got a pretty good camp so far. I mean, we've got several players that have played a lot. At the corner position, Cam Dantzler, Jamal Peters, and Chris Rayford have played a lot. And Tyler Williams and Mo Smitherman have had really good camps as well, and have put themselves in the mix, to compete for playing time. At safety of John Abram and Mark McLaurin, who are real veterans and create as good a tandem at safety as there probably is in the league, and maybe even greater than that. And we have to establish some depth there. But I've been pleased with Stephen Adegoke and C.J. Morgan have really stepped up and done a good job during camp. And London Kraft and Landon Guidry have done a good job as well. And the nickel position, Brian Cole, is a guy who redshirted last year and obviously transferred from Michigan. Played primarily on the offensive side of the ball. But he had a really good spring. He's picked it up right where he left off, and he's been really solid. But there's good competition at that nickel position, and that you got Capri Landrews, right behind him, and Marcus Murphy there too. So, we feel like we've got some pretty good depth there. Everybody talks about the depth on the D line, but I think, we've got good depth, and we got to continue to develop that depth over the next 3 weeks.
To piggyback on the safeties thing, that they were kind of all over the field last year. They were allowed to do a lot of different things. They kind of created a lot of havoc in the back end. How are you planning to use safeties, and will they have that kind of freedom to make offenses think?
When you say created havoc, I assume you mean in a good way, not a bad way.
Yeah.
I think when you look at last year's team, these guys. I've said it before. These guys, especially the older players like Mark, have had 5 defensive coordinators and really 4 or 5 safety coaches in the last several years. So I mean, it's only so many ways you can do things, But at the same time, I mean, I have veteran players back there who kind of the negative is really a positive too, because they know the game. They can talk the game, and in the meeting room, it's not like talking to a high school kid. It's like talking to a veteran football player right there, and we have those type of discussions. So, those guys. I've said this before. When you talk about a defensive scheme, rather than recruit players to fit a scheme, you try to tailor the scheme and alter your scheme to what your players are capable of doing. So we're still in the process of identifying what the guys' strengths and weaknesses are, and that's kind of an ongoing thing. But to answer your question, I mean, I think John Abram, Mark McLaurin, Brian Cole are real playmakers, and I use the term interchangeable parts. They're versatile enough to play, different positions and do different things. And what is non-negotiable about our scheme, our style of play, if you will, is, we want to be, it's built on, I always say, relentless pursuit and never-ending pressure. And pressure means bringing those guys and hopefully creating havoc. It's not, the SEC and where we want to get, it's not about being a bend but don't break unit. It's not about read and react. It's about attack. And that's those guys' mindset as well. So I think they've embraced that.
David Brandt from the AP. Kind of building on, you mentioned the 4 or 5 defensive coordinators for some of these guys that they've played under. You've done this for a while. Have you ever encountered a veteran group that kind of knew so much about, just different types of defenses and terminology? I mean, has it kind of been an interesting group to
Yeah,
lead?
it has. And, I found it to be very refreshing. I came, obviously, you come here and you don't know the guys, and you get to know them, and you hear about their personalities, you watch the film. It's been kind of a clean slate, but they're very, the blue collar work ethic of our team is really, true. I think the kids on our student athletes on our roster, both offensively and defensively, are tough, mentally tough. They're smart. they're smart, tough football players with a great work ethic, and that lends itself to success in the SEC, the Big Ten or whatever conference. I've been in situations where I've been in situations where I've inherited defenses that didn't have that type of leadership and veteran presence. And it's funny, I was just thinking about that the other day. The one that I did inherit that was very similar to this was my first defense at Penn State in 2014. And they encountered a little bit of a same situation in that, you thought of the continuity because Coach Paterno had been there so long, and then Bill O'Brien, and then Coach Franklin. So there wasn't, there hadn't been a lot of head coaches, but when I was there, they had in the fourth year players had 4 different I was their 4th different defensive coordinators. They had Tom Bradley, and then they had Ted Roof, then they had John Butler, and then they had me. So it was sort of that same situation. So those guys could talk the game a little bit, and many of those players who are upperclassmen, were really mature, and you could have those type of discussions with them, and they've gone on to great success at the next level. And maybe it's a good thing, but that defense went on to be the #1 defense in the country in run defense. So let's see what happens.
Coach Andy Lee with WTVA TV in Jubilo Hill. I know he's a zygote as far as his football development's concerned. But Jet Johnson, what have you seen out of him so far?
What's zygote? I assume that means he's a young player.
Yeah.
I enjoy talking to Jet. Jet, it's funny because the young players get a handful of reps at the end of each series of plays during the course of practice, and some of them come out on the field and they got big eyes and they're jumping around, and he kind of steps in there like a veteran. The stage doesn't appear to be too big for him, and by no means is he ready, for prime time. And today will be a big step in his development as he'll get some reps out there. But he has an opportunity to learn behind Errol and Tim Washington, and at that position also we have a junior college guy named Shamar Kilby-Lane. So we have good depth at that position. So it's not necessary that Jet come out and necessarily be Brian Urlacher today or anything along those lines. But you can tell that he gets the game of football. You can tell he's a good athlete. I mean, he was a guy who played football and basketball. He was a quarterback till he was in 9th or 10th grade. So he has a command. He has a presence about him. Like any freshman, I'm quite sure when he gets his reps in practice, his heart's pounding. I told him when he gets out there, take a nice deep breath and do your thing. And thus far, he's done a good job.
Coach, it seems like the safety position is real susceptible to the targeting rule. How do you kind of coach the proper strike zone into your guys? How do you rep that out to avoid those penalties?
Well, I mean, you hit it. I mean, the safety, the game is not really like because of all the RPOs, because of the down the field pass game, there's so many violent collisions that do occur in the game of football. And the first and most important thing, we're always studying best practices. We're trying to, like everybody else, take the head out of the game and teach techniques and fundamentals that are safe for our players and functional, for the whole unit. So first thing we always talk to our guys about is taking your head out of tackling. We're a shoulder tackling team. We talk about tackling with the shoulder pad or the frontal part of the shoulder pads on the rise, sky in the eyes, seeing what you hit, not leading with the crown of your helmet right there. And then we talk about tackling with the chest on the rise and an upward moving, fashion there. So you're using your squat and power clean muscles, ripping your arms up through the ball carrier, ripping appropriately right there, and making the tackle with your shoulder and your hips and your legs and things like that. So, we do a tremendous amount of, we start in very close quarters. We do a lot of close quarters tackling, and then we broaden it out and expand it out. And I think in those bang plays about the targeting piece, it's really important that the guys understand going for the football. I mean, there's going to be collisions that occur, but we're not out there in any way, shape, or form. And you have to understand the tackling areas. Like I always use the term strike zone. It's from the chest or the numbers, to the knees right there. And the other issue too that happens nowadays, and I've sort of studied this over the last couple of years, is because of that now you're seeing more shoulder injuries, labrum injuries. You used to hear of a dislocated or separated shoulder. Now you hear the terms torn labrum. And I think because the guys, when they tackle, my crusade is when the guys tackle, they wrap their arms around a ball carrier rather than rip their arms up through a ball carrier. So, we not only spend time teaching the best practices with regard to safety in the head, but trying to, regard the best practices with regard to the, shoulders and things along those lines. And we have a very step-by-step teaching progression with regard to our tackling that we teach our players.
Hey, Coach, Tom Little from
Hi.
WCBI here in Columbus. Another one of those young guys on defense, Marcus Murphy. Joe Moorhead had mentioned that he's playing some safety, put in some nickel spots. What have you seen from him in terms of his versatility, and where do you see him ultimately ending up on defense?
Yeah. He's obviously he's a local hero. He's been a state champion. He was a leader in his program. We're very happy that Marcus and Jet are part of our first class since we've been here. Marcus and I specifically coach him. He's played some free safety. He's primarily playing the nickel position. He's fast. He's competitive. He's tough. All those things. He's still learning a little bit about the game of football. On the defensive side, because he's primarily a high school quarterback where they'd snap the ball and he'd run. But you could see there's the old saying, I don't know what it is, but he's got it, and he's got it. He's a playmaker. He's taken the next step, because in the spring we'd always kind of joke in the film room that he would do everything wrong but end up making a play. And now he's taken the next step in that progression. He's trying to do everything right. And sometimes you got to take one step back to go 2 steps forward. So in his focus to try to do every step and everything mechanically and technically right, these first 7 or 8 days, he's been good, but he probably hasn't made as many plays as he did in the spring, or the plays he made were flash plays. But with the scrimmage tonight, my gut tells me that he's probably going to be a guy who makes a few plays out there. He's one of those guys who I think it's never the arena's never too big for him. I think he probably plays better when the coaches can stand behind him, telling him, make sure you're outside the line, make sure you're this, make sure you're that. And I think he's gonna, I think he's got a tremendously bright future in the long term. And I know at some point during the course of this year, he's gonna make significant contributions to us on special teams, maybe as a return guy or covering kicks and punts, and get in the mix somewhere in the secondary, whether it's at nickel or safety.
You've been in this game for a long time.
Jeez, you keep saying that.
Sorry. But where do Jeffrey Simmons and Montez Sweat rank in the tandems you've had on a defensive line, and what have you learned about them that you didn't see in film from last season?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I haven't coached a game yet, so it's kind of with these guys. So in that respect, it's hard to say. But you put it on the film, and it doesn't take long to identify who 94 and 9 are. I mean, you watch practice or you watch them work out for that matter. I mean, Jeffrey's the alpha dog. He's really the undisputed leader of the defense and maybe the team in some ways too. Again, another local guy, Sip Boy, who he's really fun to coach. He practices hard, he competes hard. He's, to be a great defensive team requires intensity, focus, attention to detail, and he has all those things. He's strong. He moves incredibly well for his size, and obviously, he's had a great career thus far. We have high expectations for him this year, and he's going to have a very bright future. Tez is a little bit, when I got here, I was a little concerned that he might make the decision to go to the next level. I think he made a wise decision in that I just don't think he's played enough football yet, and I think as a business investment, he made himself a lot of money probably by staying. Now, again, he's a first-team All-League returning player, and that's last year, and this is this year. But my observations in him have been he worked as hard this off-season as any player in the program as far as lifting, running. He's in great shape. He can rush the quarterback, and through 6 or 7 practices, he's probably been one of the most dominant players in the field. I think he's very driven to have a great year. He's got a positive attitude. He's got a good work ethic, and he's very, very, very competitive.